When exploring the myriad of inspirations for crafting a fantasy world, ancient India offers a wealth of unique cultural, architectural, and mythological elements to draw upon. Between 500 CE and 1000 CE, India experienced significant developments in various fields, and the rise and fall of several influential dynasties shaped the region's cultural and intellectual growth. This represents a treasure trove of world-building elements for fantasy world builders, and is a time period well worth exploring. So, welcome to another Eras Defined video by Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. Just before we dive into the video, I will be in San Diego for Comic-Con 2023, and I will be selling signed copies of the Sangwheel Chronicles book, books 1 and 2, The Hidden Blade and Ducal Heir. If you want to pick up a signed copy, come look for me and Drake, my podcast partner, in the small press area. If you want a signed copy but you can't be there, or want to ensure that you do get a signed copy in case I sell out, there is a link to pre-order on my Ko-fi page. I will send out the orders from Las Vegas while I'm there. So if you want signed copies of my books, pre-order on my Ko-fi page now. Okay, without further ado, let's explore the wonders of ancient India. One of the most fascinating aspects of ancient India is the rich tapestry of myths, legends, and religious beliefs. Hinduism and Buddhism both have their roots in India, and their intricate mythologies provide an abundance of inspiration for fantasy world building. The vast pantheon of Hindu gods and goddesses, each with their unique attributes, powers, and stories, could serve as the basis for a very complex and enchanting magical system. For instance, the concept of avatars or divine incarnations can be used to develop a race of shape-shifting beings who descend from the gods to protect or guide people. Buddhism, on the other hand, emphasizes the quest for spiritual enlightenment, transcending the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth known as samsara. This spiritual journey could be the central theme in a fantasy setting, with characters seeking to unlock the secrets of the universe and achieve inner peace and break the cycle of rebirth. The coexistence of Buddhism and Hinduism in ancient India is also an interesting aspect to explore, and it can provide valuable insight into the dynamics of religious tolerance and cultural exchange. Although Buddhism and Hinduism share some common beliefs and concepts, they also have significant differences in their philosophical outlooks, practices, and rituals. Despite their differences, Buddhism and Hinduism coexisted relatively peacefully during this period of India's history. There are several factors contributing to this harmonious coexistence, obviously, and understanding those factors can help inform you in the creation of your fantasy world where you want multiple belief systems to exist without conflict. So let's take a look at some of the reasons why Buddhism and Hinduism manage to coexist like this. As I said, they both have their roots in the Indian subcontinent and they share many common beliefs and practices, such as karma, dharma, samsara. And just to define those concepts, dharma is the righteousness and duty of an individual whose quality of incarnation, karma, defines his place in the circle of life and death, which is samsara. There are, of course, differences that exist between these two religions, the main one being when it comes to the gods. Buddhism does not believe in a single creator god, while Hinduism does. Buddhism is more focused on the teachings of the Buddha and the path to enlightenment, while Hinduism is more focused on the worship of multiple gods and goddesses. But they did find a way to live side by side. In fact, the closest thing I could find to a conflict between them is a debate in Tibet. This debate was initiated by King Trisong Detsen, who was the second of the three Dharma kings of Tibet and ruled from AD 755 to 800 or so. The date is disputed. He played a pivotal role in the introduction of Buddhism to Tibet and the establishment of Nyingma, or the ancient school of Tibetan Buddhism. He invited both Hindu and Buddhist scholars to his court in the 8th century AD for a debate on the merits of the two schools. The Buddhists won the debate, and this became the dominant religion in Tibet. Over time, Buddhism and Hinduism influenced each other, leading to a degree of syncretism between the two religions. For instance, many Hindu gods and goddesses were incorporated into Buddhist iconography and vice versa. Similarly, some Buddhist practices and concepts were adopted by Hinduism, and both religions borrowed from each other sacred texts and philosophical ideas. The exchange and adaptation helped to foster a sense of unity and shared understanding between the two faiths. So, if you're going to have a region like India with many interconnected countries and rulers, it's important to think about how religions intermingle and how much they borrow from each other over time. And speaking of rulers and religion, throughout ancient India's history, various rulers have supported and patronized both Buddhism and Hinduism, providing them with the resources needed to build temples, monasteries, and educational institutions. This royal patronage helped to establish both religions as integral parts of Indian society and ensured that they could coexist without significant conflict. So, if you want to have religions that coexist, I would definitely suggest taking a look at how Hinduism and Buddhism managed to both find a place in the sun without resulting in the conflict that we typically think about in terms of the Middle Eastern Abrahamic faiths clashing. So, if you enjoyed that discussion about religion in India, hit the thumbs up button, and let's talk about architecture and art. Ancient India boasts an impressive array of architectural wonders, from the elaborate cave temples of the Ajanta and Ellores to the majestic Kalasa temple carved out of a single rock. I am trying with the pronunciation. If I get it horrifyingly wrong, I'm really sorry, and leave me a link to how to pronounce the words correctly down below. These awe-inspiring structures could serve as the backdrop for epic quests or provide hidden structures for magical beings in your world. So let's take a look at some of these structures in this time period in a bit more detail. Stupas are dome-shaped Buddhist structures containing relics, often of the Buddha or prominent monks, and were used as places of meditation. They are characterized by their distinctive shape, featuring a mound-like structure with a central spire or pillar. An example of a famous stupa is the Great Stupa at Sanchi. Hindu temples were built to house deities and serve as places of worship. These structures typically feature ornate carvings and sculptures depicting the various gods, goddesses, and mystical creatures. The temples often have a sanctum sanctorum, innermost chamber, where the main deity is placed, surrounded by a series of smaller chambers and courtyards. The Konark Sun Temple and the Khajuraho temples are prime examples of intricate temple architecture, and I would definitely lean into the maze aspect of this if you're building this in your world. India during this time period has some great stepwell architecture. So stepwells are unique architectural structures designed to provide access to water in regions with limited resources. They consist of a series of steps descending into the well, allowing people to reach the water level even if it fluctuates throughout the year. The Shandbori stepwell in Rajasthan is a famous example of a stepwell. And it's a very cool structure to incorporate in your world, especially if you've got places where the water level is very dodgy. Ancient India, of course, saw constructions of many forts and palaces for royalty and for centers of political power and for defense. These structures were often adorned with elaborate carvings and murals and so forth. Examples include the Red Fort in Delhi and the Amber Fort in Jaipur. Indian construction of forts definitely seems to lean more towards domes than the blockier castles of Europe, but both of these structures serve the same purpose, protection of the land, as I discussed in my video on fortifications, which you can check out in the information card. So much for architecture, but what about art? Indian art offers a wealth of inspiration with its intricate sculptures, vibrant paintings, and delicate textiles. These artistic expressions could be woven into the fabric of your fantasy world, and they could adorn the walls of ancient temples or grace the robes of powerful sorcerers. And if you follow this channel, you must know by now that I firmly believe in building out the art of your world in rich detail so that you can world build with it. Do you have a tapestry somewhere? Great, what's on it? That which is displayed on your tapestry should build out the mythology of your world. Anyway, let's talk about the art types in India during this time period. Indian sculpture is characterized by its intricate detailing, often depicting religious figures and scenes from mythology. These sculptures are typically crafted from stone, wood, or metal and placed in temples, palaces, and other public spaces. Examples include the sculptures in the Elephanta caves and the stone carvings at Hampi. Indian textiles are renowned for their intricate patterns and vibrant colors. Techniques such as block printing, weaving, and embroidery have been used to create stunning designs on fabrics like silk, cotton, and wool. Examples of traditional textile art include the hand-woven saris of Varanasi and the intricate embroidery of the Kantha tradition. Metalwork in ancient India ranged from bronze and gold sculptures to finely crafted jewelry and ornate household items. The famous dancing girl bronze statue from the Indus Valley civilization and the gold jewelry excavated from the Sanchi Stupa site exemplify the skill and artistry of ancient Indian metalworking. So if you're drawing inspiration from India during this time period, I would lean heavily into textiles and metalwork. I think that along with the ever-present statues, seriously, everyone has statues, the textiles and metalworking would create a pretty rich art environment that is reasonably unique. And if you enjoyed this discussion of art and architecture, hit the thumbs up button and let's talk science. Ancient India's scholars made significant contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The concept of zero, the decimal, and the decimal system were developed during this period. And the famous Indian mathematician and astronomer Aryabhata made groundbreaking discoveries in his field. So let's take a closer look at some of these discoveries of Aryabhata. He wrote a work called the Aryabhata, and it is a compilation of his mathematical and astronomical knowledge. It covers a huge variety of topics, and he was one of the first mathematicians to provide an approximation of the mathematical constant pi, which he calculated to be approximately 3.1416. Aryabhata proposed an early heliocentric model of the solar system, suggesting that the Earth rotates on its axis and revolves around the Sun. This idea was pretty revolutionary at the time and contradicted the prevailing geocentric view. He accurately calculated the length of a sidereal day, which is the time it takes for the Earth to complete one rotation relative to the Sun, as 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.1 seconds. You know, so many fantasy authors just ignore technology, and honestly, it is worth thinking about who in your world is trying to advance science and how far they've gotten. Aryabhata proves that you can have really smart astronomers and mathematicians advancing the knowledge of your people quite far. But speaking of advanced things, let's turn to something a little more practical than maths and talk about medical knowledge. Ancient Indian medicine was highly advanced for its time, and its practice formed the basis for the traditional system of medicine known as Ayurveda. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Some aspects of the medical technology level at the time include some surgical techniques. Indian physicians such as Shushruta developed advanced surgical techniques and procedures, including cataract surgery and the use of sutures, stitches for wounds, made from animal sinew. This is why, on my southern continent of Kisangi in my books, I have eye surgeons who can deal with cataracts, especially since I have high quality glass down there that can produce lenses for people to see through after cataract surgery. But surgery wasn't the only medical advance. Ayurveda made extensive use of plants and herbs for medicinal purposes, with knowledge of their properties passed down through generations. Many modern medicines are derived from these ancient herbal remedies, though obviously refined and purified with modern chemical knowledge. Ancient Indian medicine emphasized the importance of balance in the body and the mind and considered the overall well being of the patient in treatment plans. This approach included dietary recommendations, exercise, meditation, and even lifestyle adjustments to maintain health and prevent illness. So, in your world, you could reasonably put in advanced medical knowledge in your societies, especially if you include magic. And speaking of magic, in a fantasy world inspired by ancient Indian knowledge, a magic system could be developed based on the principles of mathematics and the understanding of the cosmos. So, here are some ideas for such a system. You could build a system on numeromancy. Practitioners of this mathematical magic, known as numeromancers, could manipulate the fundamental principles of numbers and equations to cast spells or enchantments. By understanding the underlying mathematical patterns that govern reality, they can bend the laws of nature to their will. So your spells could literally be equations that alter reality around you rather than being words. Or perhaps you could use celestial magic. By studying the movements of celestial bodies and their mathematical relationships, practitioners could tap into the power of the stars and the planets to cast powerful spells or perform divinations. Astrological alignments and celestial events such as eclipses and conjunctions could have a significant impact on the potency of this magic. In this kind of a system, the power available to a mage would fluctuate with the alignment of the celestial body, and certain kinds of magic could be easier to cast at one time of the day or year than others. This leads to your mages very carefully needing to calculate when to cast which spell. You could also tie this into an elemental magic system, where it's easier to use fire, earth, air, or water at certain times based on the celestial alignments. Or perhaps you could have a magic system of sacred geometry, where practitioners could harness the power of sacred geometry to create magical construct, wards, or glyphs. By understanding the mathematical relationships between shapes and forms, they can imbue these geometric patterns with magical energy, resulting in a wide range of effects. So instead of basically using runes, as I discussed in my video on runic magic, check out the info card, you could use geometric shapes as your runes and have your spellcasters use those geometric shapes to cast their magic with. By integrating these elements into your fantasy world, you can create a unique and engaging magic system that also leans into the discoveries of mathematics and astronomy that was going on in India around this time. And if you enjoyed that discussion of magic and mathematics, hit the thumbs up button and let's talk about politics and warfare. Ancient India saw the rise and fall of powerful empires and dynasties, such as the Gupta Empire and the Chola dynasty. These political entities could serve as inspiration for complex, multi-layered societies, each with their unique customs, systems of government, and military strategies. That being the case, let's take a deeper look at the Gupta Empire. The Gupta Empire is considered by many as the golden age of ancient India, and it was established around the 4th century CE by Maharaja Siri Gupta. However, it was under the rule of his grandson, Chandragupta I, that the empire truly began to flourish. Chandragupta I expanded the empire's territories through conquest and strategic alliances, such as his marriage to the Lishava princess Kumaradevi. The Gupta Empire had a highly efficient administrative system with a centralized government that allowed local rulers to maintain control over their regions, provided they paid tribute and remained loyal to the emperor. This decentralized approach enabled the empire to manage its vast territories more effectively. The Gupta Empire had a thriving economy, driven by agricultural, trade, and the production of goods such as textiles, metalwork, and pottery. The rulers of the empire encouraged trade and commerce, which allowed the empire to prosper and maintain control over its territories. The Gupta rulers were patrons of art, literature, and science, and they fostered the growth of Hinduism and Buddhism. By supporting religious institutions and promoting cultural activities, they helped unify their diverse empire under a shared cultural identity. They nation built with religion and science. But of course, we know from history that all empires eventually fall apart. The decline of the Gupta Empire began in the late 5th century CE with a series of invasions from the Central Asian Huns led by Mirakula. The empire eventually fragmented into smaller regional kingdoms, unable to withstand the external and internal pressure. Of course, all this war meant that there were weapons and fighting styles, so let's talk about those. Ancient Indian warfare featured various strategies and weapons unique to the regions. Some examples include the use of war elephants. Ancient Indian armies made extensive use of war elephants in battle. They were trained to charge the enemy lines, causing chaos and destruction, and often wore armor for added protection, making them even more frightening. Then there was the Chakravyuh formation. This is a strategic military formation mentioned in the Indian epic, the Mahabharata. The Chakravyuh was a concentric circular arrangement of soldiers designed to confuse and entrap the enemy. It resembles a labyrinth of multiple defensive walls, and in order to form this formation, the commander has to identify soldiers who will form this formation, the number of soldiers to be deployed, and the size of the formation is calculated as per the resistance of the enemy as it's estimated. It is a pretty incredible military formation and very powerful. However, it requires a lot of soldiers to form it. So if you're going to use this formation, bear in mind your army needs to be substantial. You're not going to do this with a small war band. They're just going to get encircled and overrun. So you need an army for this. In terms of weapons, ancient Indian armies employed a range of unique weapons such as the chakra, a razor-sharp circular disc, the vajra, a spiked mace, the khanda, a double-edged straight sword. These weapons were often wielded by warriors skilled in martial arts like the Kalaripayattu. This martial art, which dates back at least to the 6th century CE, could provide the basis for a unique combat style or warrior caste in your fantasy world. Skilled fighters trained in this ancient art might serve as elite guards or assassins, wielding their deadly knowledge to protect or eliminate their targets. So, what is actually involved in this martial art? So, it is characterized by its fluid movements, high degree of flexibility, and strong emphasis on both physical and mental conditioning. Practitioners of Kalaripayattu undergo rigorous training to develop agility, flexibility, strength, and stamina. The martial art incorporates various exercises, including yoga, to improve physical and mental prowess. It further emphasizes the use of hand-to-hand combat techniques such as punches, kicks, elbow strikes, and grappling moves. But these techniques are often combined with very fluid movements and evasive maneuvers to create a dynamic and unpredictable fighting style. And practitioners do train with a variety of weapons, including swords, daggers, shields, and spears. One really iconic weapon of this particular martial art is the urumi, a flexible whip-like sword with a razor-sharp blade that can be wielded with great speed and precision. So if you're drawing on India during this period for inspiration, I would seriously consider building a weapon like the urumi into your world. Interestingly, practitioners of this martial art also study the art of healing and knowledge of the human body's vital points, the marmas. This knowledge allows them to target vulnerable areas during combat, as well as heal injuries and ailments using traditional massage techniques and herbal remedies. It is a martial art that is deeply rooted in spirituality and incorporates elements of Hinduism and Buddhism. Practitioners often perform rituals and prayers and meditations as part of their training, seeking to harmonize their bodies, minds, and spirits. If you used this as the basis for a martial art in your world, you can build a fighting style that incorporates magic as well and make this into a magic system based on the conditioning of the body and on your manipulation of chakras. So practitioners could use their own power more efficiently by opening their own chakras, or they could strike at their opponent's chakra by finding it within the body and making a strike using this martial art on the human body. And I think that that would make for a very, very interesting both fighting style and magic system. And I do love a really well thought out martial art magic system. I have a real weakness for that particular magic system style. And if you enjoyed this discussion of warfare and martial arts and combat, hit the thumbs up button. And let's talk about magical beings and creatures in ancient India. Ancient Indian mythology is filled with fascinating creatures and beings that can spark the imagination for your fantasy world. The Naga, for example, is a race of half-human, half-serpent beings that feature prominently in Hindu and Buddhist mythology. They inhabit the hidden realm of Patala, a subterranean world filled with jewels and treasure. The Naga could serve as an elusive and enigmatic race in your fantasy world, guarding ancient secrets or powerful artifacts deep within their realm. The Apsaras are celestial nymphs known for their beauty and grace and enchanting music and dance. So these divine creatures could be muses, or they could be intermediaries between the mortal world and the gods. And the Rakshasa, conversely, are shape-shifting demons with a penchant for deception and mischief. These creatures could be adversaries or allies in your fantasy setting, and their shape-shifting abilities could form the basis for a race that has shape-shifting abilities. And if you want my thoughts around shapeshifters and how to include them in your world, check out the information card for my ideas around shapeshifters. And those are my thoughts on using India from 500 CE to about 1000 CE as inspiration for fantasy worlds. If you want my help in building your world, hit my Ko-fi page and do remember to check out those signed book options while you're there. If you enjoyed this video, check out my video on using spiritualism in fantasy worlds as a religion, and I will see you soon for another video.